And how do you look at the MAGA movement, and what is your relationship with that as a libertarian?
Well, look, I think the MAGA movement, first of all, just represents a total rejection of the establishment consensus in the post-Cold War era. We've essentially had a one-party state, the Bushes, the Clintons, Biden and McCain, and these people who are all of essentially one mind on all of these horrific policies have really just destroyed everything. The problem is, of course, that in my point of view, it isn't free markets that have failed. There has been to some degree, like, okay, yes, as we talked about, labor's cheaper in China. So there are some incentives, and in Mexico, there are some incentives for American corporations to leave the United States and leave people behind jobless and move overseas. But the thing is, the government has made that essentially, has subsidized that, promises insurance, has like government agencies that'll help corporations move overseas and do all these things. And then, of course, have massive regulations that on the margin just make more sense to go somewhere else, even far away on the other side of the ocean, with all the shipping costs involved and security involved, just because the margins here are too damn tight, forced by our government. And then, as we're talking about, and this is something that right-wingers more and more do understand, but have been kind of deceived about in the past, was the expense of the wars. That, when W. Bush launched the war in 2003, that year and in 2004, both, for anyone who paid income tax, they got a $300 or $400 bonus check that essentially it seemed like it was a dividend. Like we were all making money off the war in Iraq. When, of course, no, we were taking $10 trillion and dumping it into the ocean, right? Completely destroying it. And yet it seemed to people like this is for us. People say war is good for the economy. That's why we got to do it all the time. War is good for the economy. Our standard of living depends on it. Right? None of that's true, right? All of this was at our expense in the American empire. Everything goes out, nothing comes back. I mean, yeah, they stole some gold bricks from Saddam, but like we're talking tens of billions of dollars. That's nothing, right? The cost is trillions of dollars at the expense of the American people. So then our economy, and here's the part where, speaking of Hyman Minsky, which I'm a friend of his son, we go back, and I know what he forgets is where all the money's coming from in the first place, and that is the Federal Reserve prints it and gives license to banks to print it. And that's where all those excess reserves come from that people then speculate on and build up the bubbles. So he's right. It's just he forgot the first part of the chain, which is government monopoly commissars controlling the currency. And they can only tax so much or will revolt. And they can only borrow so much or central banks will stop borrowing, right, and stop investing in their securities. And so then they print the rest. And now for regular Americans who don't understand why prices rise, they end up blaming the shopkeeper for raising prices. But they know that they can't afford to feed their families. They know that the price of groceries on the shelf have doubled. And you can't lie to somebody about that. I'm like, what do you mean a grocery bill is $600? It's supposed to be $300 to feed, whatever size family you're talking about. The prices of housing. You talk about deflation being bad. Tell me how it makes sense. And I don't know how it is in your country, but here, the price of a house keeps going up and up and up and up forever. When, of course, as we're all more productive, the price of a house ought to be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, as our standard of living does nothing but improve and increase based on all this productivity. But instead, what happens? The government keeps printing money, devaluing the currency. Now, that can seem like a big windfall if you already own a house and the value of your house goes up by $100,000. Now you can refinance it at a lower rate and get a bunch of cash out like it's a cash machine and get new countertops and everything. As Barack Obama might say, you didn't build that. That's essentially welfare for people who have already made it by artificially increasing the price of their house. Meanwhile, poor people and young people can't get into a house. They can't buy one. And a lot of times they can't even afford the rent. And in the Biden years, rents went up in Austin, Texas, where I'm from, rents went up from $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 to $2,500. Now, if you work at just a regular salary job, you're screwed. You're now a roommate in your 40s, moving back in with parents, living under a bridge, doing drugs to stay up all night so you don't get, beaten and mugged and lives destroyed. And it's all because of the inflationary money that is necessary to maintain the empire. And then what happens is people move further to the left and further to the right. They go, this is capitalism. If this is free market libertarian capitalism, I must be a socialist. Or if this is free market libertarian capitalism, I must be an economic nationalist. And I want Donald Trump to raise up tariffs, force those companies to come back from China, come back from Mexico, and give my cousin a job again, save my old town, and whatever that they imagine is going to happen from government intervention. But of course, tariffs are just massive taxes on the American people. And they could end up changing some trading patterns, but I don't think that any serious economist really predicts that it's going to lead to a massive return of manufacturing to the United States or manufacturing jobs. Maybe manufacturing come back here, but then it's going to be all robots doing most of the work anyway, just because times change. And so I think all of it really is folly. You see America putting tariffs on countries on goods that we don't produce, right? And things like just it's bad economics, and I don't trust any central planners, not in the Soviet Union or China or Washington D.C., to decide what prices should be and what trade flows should be. It should be purely between the people of the United States, private actors in the United States, and private actors in whatever country they're trading with to make their own contracts.
Yeah, I guess.
And the only question, I mean, I think I agree actually with a lot of what Scott just said there. The follow-up question I want to ask, and like I really would be great if Scott would come on and talk to me. With housing, for example, we have these mega corporations like BlackRock and State Street and Zillow, and they are out there buying up thousands of units and millions of houses, and they are sort of monopolizing, their control over the housing industry. I mean, that's a free market mechanism, is it not? I mean, that's something that we should police a little bit. We should take control of and say, hey, you can't do this. You can't just buy up all of the houses that you want to. And there are people, individuals can't compete with you. So isn't that something that we should control for, that we should regulate at least a little bit? I would argue one of the main problems, and one that Scott isn't addressing, is that we have the rich and the powerful and the corporations who have been writing the rules and rigging the game, rigging the system in their favor for the last, 40, 50 years or so, and shifting the burden from them onto the middle class, destroying the middle class, destroying the poor, doing everything they can to keep wages down. And like you said, even though we have productivity going up, why haven't we seen the same amount of wealth? We're not talking about wealth distribution. We're just talking about equal pay for the amount of work, for the amount of productivity that you're putting into the economy. CEOs are sucking up all of the wealth, all of the resources. They're making like hundreds of times what the average employee is making. And it's just completely gotten out of whack. It's gotten unbalanced. And there are certain things, again, like healthcare, for example, healthcare, pharmaceuticals. You have things that are open, to the whims of the free market where they really shouldn't be. You have incentive systems, because the free market is an incentive system at the end of the day. And I agree, it works in a lot of places. But when you have an incentive system tied to people's health, that with a monetary profit incentive baked into it is going to be absolutely disastrous. So you have to remove certain things from the open free market system, because you are just going to have people as victims of it at the end of the day. There are plenty of things that I think Scott just absolutely nailed there. Just have a few questions I would be very curious to know the answer to, or to get into like his mindset. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. Drop a like, subscribe, stick around, and I'll see you guys in the next one.